Forget what the documentaries told you. Mediterranean raiding wasn't clean, and it wasn't special because of a beret. It was cold water in your boots, a harbor that smelled like fuel, and a sentry who only had to get lucky once. Officially, Naval Commandos carried approved kit, logged their explosives, and followed store and issue rules. In practice, the men closest to the target solved problems with whatever worked, even when it wasn't on any list. These are the 7 illegal gadgets Allied naval commandos used in Mediterranean raids. Number 7. Unauthorized limpet mines. Vital explosives banned for stealth operations. Naval explosive regulations were written for ships with magazines, paperwork, and chains of custody. In 1942, raiding detachments were supposed to carry issued charges with approved fuses, properly accounted for, and handled by authorized ratings. Unapproved devices weren't just discouraged. They created liability. One lost mine could compromise an entire harbor operation. But the special boat service lived in the gap between paperwork and shoreline. In small craft raids in the Mediterranean in 1942, men carried limpets that weren't officially on the books, because a compact magnetic mine was the only thing that could be planted under a hull from a rubber dinghy or swimmer's bag. Off Crete, British raiders targeted Italian shipping inside defended anchorages. A limpet wasn't elegant. It was a timed argument with physics. When it worked, a single mine could cripple a supply ship at anchor and force delays, inspections, and cautious rerouting afterward. When it didn't, the consequences were personal. A premature noise, a dropped charge, or a mine found during a search meant immediate pursuit. And a very real chance of disciplinary blowback if the team even made it home. Number 6. Improvised magnetic clamps. Repurposed for sabotage and silent kills. The official system liked standardization. Stores catalogs, approved patterns, tools that met a drawing and could be replaced anywhere in the fleet. For covert work, that meant you were supposed to rely on issued fittings and purpose-made attachments for charges, not workshop one-offs made from scrap metal and optimism. In Mediterranean harbor raiding, that theory didn't survive contact with wet hands and curved steel. Commandos improvised magnetic clamps so they could hold an explosive or a line on an awkward surface without hammering, tying, or scraping. They scavenged magnets, shaped brackets, and built quick-release rigs that could be slapped onto a hull or a dock fitting in seconds. At night, seconds were the currency. A clamp that bit cleanly meant no repeated attempts, no metallic clatter, and no silhouette stuck working under a pier light. Used well, these clamps enabled silent placement of charges in Axis harbors and faster withdrawals. Used badly, they betrayed their owners. A weak magnet could slide on fouled plating. A clamp that snapped shut too hard could ring like a bell underwater, or pinch a finger so badly a swimmer lost grip and time. Exactly what sentries were trained to notice. Number 5. Home-built time delay fuses. Homemade devices defying standard protocol. Time fuses were supposed to be predictable. Issued, tested, handled under strict rules, because a timing error isn't an inconvenience, it's a dead team or a blown mission. British doctrine preferred standardized ignition systems and controlled distribution, especially for naval explosives meant to be carried in small craft and handled in the dark. But in 1942, raiding units needed delays tailored to reality, not paperwork. A swimmer planting a charge on a ship needed enough time to clear the boom, paddle back to the rendezvous, and still have a detonation that looked accidental to anyone investigating later. So men built or modified time delay fuses themselves, mixing parts, adapting clockwork mechanisms, or using chemical delays when they couldn't get the exact store issue. The raids against Axis supply movement supporting Rommel's forces demanded that kind of timing. Hit the ship, leave quietly, let the explosion happen later, away from the swimmers. When these home-built fuses behaved, they bought distance and deniability. When they didn't, they failed both ways. Some charges didn't fire at all, leaving evidence for enemy divers. Others fired early. That wasn't drama. It was a math error with a blast radius. Number 4. Muffled paddles and oarlocks. Silent rowing for covert insertions. Naval supply regulations expected equipment to remain in issued condition. Standard paddles, standard oarlocks, No field modifications that might weaken gear, interfere with handling, or complicate replacement. In peacetime thinking, noise discipline was a training issue, not a procurement problem. In night raids along Italy's shores in 1943, it became a hardware problem. A dinghy approaching a quay didn't have engines to mask sound. Every squeak of an oarlock, every dull knock of wood on gunwale, carried across still water. So commandos wrapped contact points, cloth, tape, rubber, even cut inner tube, and packed oarlocks to remove play. Some teams dulled paddle edges to prevent the sharp slap that happens when a blade exits the water wrong. It was small and unglamorous. It also kept men alive. The upside was obvious: quieter approaches and fewer early challenges from sentries. The downside came later. Padding soaked, swelled, and shifted. A muffled oarlock could jam at the wrong moment, or the wrap could loosen and start scraping anyway. If you had to choose silence now or reliability later, what would you gamble on in a guarded harbor at midnight? Before we move on, which would you rather trust on a real raid? An unapproved explosive you can place fast, or a proper, issued system that forces you to improvise under a spotlight? Tell us your pick below. Subscribe if you want the no-myth version of these operations. Number 3. Cut down boarding ladders. Shorter meant faster until it meant falling. Boarding gear was meant to be predictable. Issued ladders had set lengths, rated strength, and fittings that matched rails and bulwarks. Naval doctrine assumed you'd come alongside in controlled conditions, with enough ladder to clear a high freeboard and enough rungs to climb with weight on your chest. A raiding party didn't want enough. It wanted the minimum that worked. Full-length ladders snagged on stanchions, clattered on contact, and were miserable to stow in a canoe or collapsible boat. So teams cut them down. They trimmed rungs, shortened side rails, and swapped hooks to fit a specific quay wall or a specific class of coaster. Some even wrapped the hooks to deaden the first bite on metal. You weren't boarding a ship in daylight. You were trying to be on deck before a sentry turned his head back. When the guess was right, a short ladder was a clean, fast climb and a quick exit route on the way out. When it was wrong, it failed hard: too short for the freeboard, a hook that slipped, a rung that cracked under a soaked kit load. The splash was loud, so was the panic. Number 2. Blacked out and repainted kit. Regulations wanted recognition. Raids demanded anonymity. Uniform and equipment rules existed for a reason. Markings helped with issue and recovery. Webbing and packs were supposed to stay in approved colors. Helmet finishes, metal fittings, even reflective bits were controlled so units could identify their own men in confusion and keep gear from walking. On a Mediterranean shoreline, those rules became a liability. Light finds the stupidest surfaces: a brass buckle, a glossy paint patch, a factory stamp on a canteen cup. So commandos blacked things out. They smeared lamp black and grease on metal, scuffed shine-off knives and compasses, and repainted packs and dinghy fittings in dull mixes that wouldn't flash under a flare. Some swapped dyed tape for stitched labels. Others removed anything that could catch moonlight or leave a unit trace if it was dropped. Sometimes it worked exactly as intended. Sentries missed shapes that would have been obvious with a single bright edge. Sometimes it backfired. Grease transferred to hands, then to weapon grips. Paint clogged a moving part. And stripped markings meant lost kit couldn't be recovered or explained when someone asked where it came from. Number 1. Captured Italian and German deck gear. The perfect tool if it didn't betray you. In theory, you didn't use enemy equipment. Intelligence shops wanted captured gear tagged and sent up the chain. Operationally, unauthorized trophies created confusion, friendly fire risk, and awkward questions if a man was searched. Naval stores systems weren't built for a commando turning up with Italian fittings in his bag. In practice, captured deck gear was often better for the job. Italian boat hooks, German lines, unfamiliar shackles, things designed for the exact harbors you were entering. Using local pattern rope or a familiar cleat fitting meant you could rig fast in the dark without forcing your hands to learn a new geometry under pressure. Sometimes teams carried enemy pattern items specifically so a cutting, tying, or prying job would leave normal traces. Sabotage that looked like routine harbor damage bought time. When it worked, it was quiet competence. the right hook, the right line, and you're moving again before anyone thinks to look. When it didn't, it left fingerprints. A distinctive knot style. An item an alert sentry recognized as missing. Or the worst case, being caught with enemy gear on you, and having no believable reason to possess it. Every raid sits in the same gap. The institution wants controlled equipment, controlled outcomes, controlled stories. The shoreline doesn't cooperate. So men narrowed the problem to what they could hold, cut, wrap, paint, and carry small violations committed for survival and timing, not romance. If you want World War II history without simplification or mythology, subscribe to Brass and Blitz. More raids, more tools, more consequences told the way they actually worked.